Hey folks, here we are. We are going to, for week 5, we're going to finish the contingency models, and I'm going to introduce some of these other leadership theories that I think are just kind of critical and central for understanding it as people who are studying a leadership class and kind of what it means and how it can be useful. So a lot of stuff today. I'm not going to spend a lot of detail. If we were in class together and had a big 3-hour long night class, we'd be able to, really go through this stuff and be able to explain it. But so that you don't have to listen to this for the rest of the afternoon, I'll just kind of go through a little faster and invite you to do some additional research on your own. All right, so we ended last week with discussion of Fiedler's contingency model, and also Hersey and Blanchard's situational leadership theory model. And then I introduced Etzioni and showed how that compliance typology is really also a contingency model as well. So I'm going to show you a couple more that I think are kind of traditionally regarded as contingency models, and then I'm going to show you some other ones and maybe point out one that we have in the book as a contingency model, but it really probably could be something else. So this first one I want to bring up, and I'm putting the dates. I went back and put the dates on these slides for you to kind of understand how the development worked. So Etzioni, 61, Fiedler, we kind of say 64. The contingency model, the situational leadership theory, Hersey and Blanchard came out in the late 60s. And so Vroom and Yetton, here's a different one. It's a different take. This one, I'll show you here. It's described in the book, but there are 3 different components to this. So as a contingency model has different pieces to kind of help us figure out the right way to do stuff depending on the situation. These are going to be the components. So this level of participation in the decision, this is a decision-making model. So it's going to be the levels of participation of the people for the most part. And then one of those dimensions is the quality of the decision that has to be made and the acceptance. And then lastly, those are going to put together on a decision tree. So kind of like Fiedler, we looked at a couple of pieces and then we stuck them together into the model to kind of explain. So here's what it looks like. And I'm using some of the slides I'm using that came with the book, and other ones I've gone in and modified. But when you talk about Vroom and Yetton, and then later Vroom and Jago, this is how they described it. So coming up with that contingency, how do we make decisions? And if you look right here, there are 3 different styles. A stands for autocratic, which means the leader is going to decide by him or herself. C stands for consultative. You're going to consult with your people. And then G stands for group. Now, there's not a G1. They said that's just kind of beyond the scope of what they want to discuss. And so every time you see Vroom and Yetton, it's going to be A1, A2, C1, C2, and G2. And so as I learned this, and as I remember it, and as I help teach, which we're doing right now, we start at the bottom. A1, autocratic, one person is involved in making the decision. So that's the style. It's very autocratic. Leader makes the decision alone without input. A1, one person involved, autocratic, the leader makes the decision. This one, A2, the leader's still going to make the decision, but is going to request some information, not necessarily to consult, but just information. Hey, I need this report. Can you get me the numbers from last? Can I see the employee records or whatever, the sales reports, whatever that may be. I need some additional information. And then the person makes the decision by him or herself. So A1, make it by myself with information in my head. A2, I make it by myself, but with some additional information that I get from someone or several someones who have that information. So that's the A style, autocratic. Consultative is that I'm going to consult. I'm going to ask other people what their thoughts are and their opinions and maybe what their suggestions. That's different from just seeking information. So on this one, leader informally requests information or opinions from employees, one-on-one meetings. So C1, I consult with you kind of one at a time. That's how I remember those stuff. C2 is I'm going to consult with other people, but in a bigger forum with a group. And so 2 is going to be more than one person I consult with. It's going to be 2 or more. So consultative 2, I'm going to get your thoughts and ideas one person at a time. A C2 style is I'm going to get the opinions of more people in a group setting. And then G2 is going to be the one where I let the group make the decision. So we hold a group meeting, we discuss the issue, and then I let the people figure out how to do it. So with these different styles, that's really a continuum that they've got right here. By myself, all the information in my head. By myself, by getting some additional information. Consult with one person at a time, consult with a group, and then the last one is let the group decide. So that's one piece of Rumen-Yetton. And then what you do is you combine it into this tree. And so there are different dimensions, and I'll explain it. There are different questions, and these are the questions down here. So it said quality and acceptance. So the first question would be, is there a quality requirement? If there is a quality requirement, then you're probably going to want to involve more people in it. If it's not, then you can kind of decide by yourself. Q4 is acceptance. Here, I'm going to slide up this one just to show you how to read this thing. So if I ask this question at node 1, is there a quality requirement? And my answer is no, then I can slide up here. And then I ask this question at Q4, is acceptance of the decision by subordinates critical to its implementation? If the answer is no, then I can just decide by myself. This is the style, the decision-making style that Rumen-Yetton said is appropriate in that situation. So when there's no quality, what am I going to have for lunch today, or some of that, other people don't need to be involved in that. It doesn't really matter if they accept it. I can just decide by myself. That's a simple example, but within an organization, kind of the same thing. Go back here, if there is a quality component, then it's going to throw you down to this node, in which you ask right here, do I have sufficient information to make a high quality decision? If yes, and then acceptance is not, then I can also be A1. If I go to yes, and then ask this, is it important that others are involved? Then I can slide down here. And what you do is you just keep asking these questions under the different nodes. And what they do is they eventually lead you at the end of this tree to the appropriate styles. So a G2, when you let the group make the decision, is when there is a quality requirement. And then do I have sufficient information? Yes. And then at this node, is acceptance critical? If it is yes, then you slide down here. If I were to make a decision by myself, is it reasonably certain that it would be accepted by subordinates? If the answer is no, then you slide down to this node. Does subordinates share the goals to be obtained? If yes, then that's the time to let the group decide. So really, this kind of ties back with situational leadership theory. When do you delegate to people? When they are most ready or most mature, when they're able and willing. So hopefully that makes a little more sense as you read through this. I remember the first time I looked at it, just kind of looking at it wasn't super intuitive, but you have to combine it with that A1 down to G2 style as well. All right, so that's Rumen-Yetton, decision-making, a decision-making model. Here's the next one. This is also regarded as a contingency model in my mind and in most books that you'll see. This is House's path goal theory. 1971 is the date that I found on that. I like to think of this as a contingency perspective on goal setting. So goals to be motivating, there's kind of a motivation model. They must be accepted, challenging, specific, and provide feedback. And so kind of goals by themselves, that's kind of what they are. If they're challenging, not too hard, not too easy. If they're specific, if they provide feedback and the people buy into them, that's when they're going to be most motivating. The people can work for the goal to perform, and then hopefully with the perform, there's some kind of outcome. So kind of dancing around the ideas of operant conditioning as well. I like to think of path goal theory as kind of the, like I said, the contingency model of goal setting. In that, now this is right here, it's also kind of dancing around the ideas of expectancy theory. Some of these things right here are expectancy theory, Vroom's expectancy theory. So we have a bunch of different people. All the people have different abilities. They have different readiness levels. They have different maturity levels. They have different, able and willing. Some of them are able to be delegated to. Some of them kind of need to be told what to do. So as the one in charge, I know who my people are, and I know what they are capable of doing, what goals they're capable of reaching, and I also know what kind of outcomes they want. So if they reach the level of performance, what do they want from that? So as the one in charge, my job is to, with each of my people, is basically this: clear the path to the goal for my people, for each individual person. So with that, that's the contingency model. It's not just setting a standard goal for everybody, but it's setting a goal for each particular person and then making sure that they have the ability and the resources and the willingness and the rewards attached to it for actually going and accomplishing that goal. So with one person, they may have a goal of, 10, whatever that may be. And in order to reach that 10, they need to have these things kind of cleared out of the way. They need a desk, they need a computer, they need a helper, they need these budget reports, they need whatever. And so my job as the one in charge is to make sure they have those things and that they understand why the goal is important and to boost up their confidence so that they can accomplish that goal. With this other person, their goal might be a 20. And because they've been doing stuff in 10s for a long time, they have a different set of challenges. So maybe they need some access higher up in the organization, or they need a bigger budget or something. And so what my job as the one in charge is to clear the path to that person's goal in addition to clearing the path to the other person's goal. So that's kind of how my brain likes to think. And as far as what I want you to be able to take away, you can jump in and look at a lot more depth and detail and discussion on these. But if you really just kind of file away in your head, the leader's job under House's path goal theory is to clear the path to the goal, and that everybody's goal is different, and that the path people are going to take are going to be different as well. So again, this is expectancy theory right here, which we'll play with as a motivation model. So the book had some other things right in here, kind of operant condition, goal setting, expectancy theory, and that's it. So the book, using the slides from the book, this is kind of how they break out the different characteristics into the leader-follower situation framework that they have. So really those two, in addition to the ones that we've already talked about, I kind of regard those as kind of the classic contingency models. And then I'm going to show you some others. So this one's not in the book. I love this one. This is Hollander's idiosyncrasy credits. And actually it's a lot older than I thought it was. I thought it was more recent, but looking, it was first proposed back in '58. So Edwin Hollander, he said, we like to think of leadership and the ability to influence kind of like a bank account. So when a person's step comes into a situation, in the minds, remember the minds of the followers, if they do good things, if they're friendly, if they're personable, if they take on challenging goals and they succeed, if they do the right things, then in the minds of the people they work with, they're going to be given, I'm going to call it PowerPoints, even though he never called it that. That's what I'm going to call it. You're giving them credits kind of in their minds of their leadership ability, of the willingness of the people to follow. And when they suggest something, how much credit are they going to have in kind of their influence bank account? And so by succeeding and doing good things and the right things and having success, and people see that where you're suggesting they go and how you lead them is the right thing to do, they're going to be more willing to follow. They're going to give you a bigger balance. And then when you suggest something that's maybe kind of out of the ordinary, if you have enough credits in your bank account to get them to come along, they will. But if you mess up, you're going to lose credits. All right. So if you get all the people rallied together and you convince them that this enterprise or venture is worth following, and they follow you and it turns out to be a big flop, then the next time they're not going to be so willing to follow you. You've lost that credit in their minds. So just kind of a neat way to think about it. While we're here, I'm also going to mention that charismatic leaders, which we're coming to in a little bit, charismatic leaders are the ones who deal in big exchanges. They're the ones who get big deposits. They're also the ones, when they fail, they have humongous withdrawals as well. So they're kind of the high rollers in the idiosyncrasy credits world. I think kind of a fun little project. If you think about letters of reference, as a professor, I get a lot of requests from my students to write letters of recommendation. And if you think about that, that's really kind of dancing around the ideas of idiosyncrasy credits. So you've got someone new applying for this position, and the new place doesn't really know them, and so they don't have a lot of credits other than what they have seen and learned from their interview and on their resume. So what they do is they ask a person to go get people who can speak for them, almost like a co-signer on that account. And so by putting title and description stuff, what I'm doing is when I recommend somebody, I'm basically taking some money out of my account and giving it to that person. And so when that person is then hired or given that opportunity, when that person succeeds, then it also comes back to me because I'm the one who recommended this person. And so because they succeeded, I've also gained credits. But if the person I recommend turns out to be a flop, they're going to lose the credits, but I'm also going to lose credits. I will not have the credibility with people in the future to be able to recommend because I said bet on this person and that person didn't follow through as they were supposed to. So in an interesting kind of a fun little model, idiosyncrasy credits. I think it'll come in useful and handy to you as you are leading and as you're kind of evaluating the situations in which you find yourself. So that's Hollander. Again, just a good little model to kind of file away and to be able to draw upon. It has to do with change. So if you're trying to change stuff, to do something different, to change things, you have to have the credits in your bank account to be able to enact that change, to bring it about and to make it happen. All right, this one. Now this one's kind of near and dear to my heart. My dissertation chairman and mentor through my doctoral program. This was actually part of his grad school, Jim Cashman. And I remember the seminar class where he drew this on the board, kind of the first time, not the first time I heard it, but the first time I heard it from him. And so this is the way he described it. Now, I put blue person right here, not like the Blue Man Group or anything, but going back to that idea that shades of blue. So you got someone in charge. And we like to think that they're a leader, but they're the one in charge. And so what you do is at some point, the 4 members who report to that one in charge have to rate the person. So, one could be an awesome blue person or 5 could be the awesome. It doesn't really matter for this example. But what Cashman showed us, and kind of as you look through this, if you have 4 people rate the one in charge and 2 of them give the person a 1 and 2 of them give the person a 5, kind of the traditional way of evaluating the person would be to take the average of these. The average would be a 3. So it doesn't matter if 1 is good or 1 is bad or 5 is good and 5 is bad. We see that the 3 would show that it's kind of an average person. And so the traditional way of assigning effectiveness scores to people would be to take the average. But if you look at this, which is what they did, Grain and Associates, they said that 3 doesn't make sense. No one has rated this person a 3. 2 people gave them 1 rating and the other 2 gave them the opposite rating. And so to call them an average, we're not capturing everything. And so what they decided instead is they needed to analyze the relationship, the difference in relationships between the one in charge and the ones who got 1s, and the one in charge and the ones who gave 5s. VDL is what it was originally called. Vertical within an organizational chart, dyad, let's analyze 2 people, and linkage. Vertical dyad linkage, VDL, is what it was called. And so what they wanted to do was study what is the difference between these relationships where 5s are assigned and these relationships where 1s are assigned. And realizing that this average leadership style of a 3 is not the best way to analyze this. And so what Grain and others did, now this is right out of the book, I use this one except I turned these red. What they did is they studied those relationships and they concluded, now again it was originally called VDL, they later changed the name to Leader Member Exchange, LMX, back in the 70s. What they found was, here's kind of their conclusion, within any group, within any organization, work team, what tends to happen is within a relatively short amount of time, now hear this, leaders develop special relations with some of the people and ordinary relations with others. It's not that they dislike them, it's just they're ordinary relations. Okay, so within a relatively short amount of time, leaders will develop special relations with a certain group of people and just ordinary relations with the others. They call these the in-group the one who have this special connection with the one in charge, and then the outgroup or the cadre, the hired hands. They're just kind of the ones who are working. And they said that these relationships, whether you're an in-group or an out-group, tend to be relatively stable over time. So if you come in as an in-group, you're, I guess unless you mess up, you could slide to the out-group. But out-groupers, if you kind of form that relationship as an out-grouper, it's kind of difficult to slide over and become an in-grouper. So more of a descriptive model. If you think about prescriptive models, they kind of prescribe what to do. They tell you what to do. Descriptive models kind of describe what's going on. I see LMX as more of a descriptive model. And if you think about change, so within an organization, you have all these reporting relationships. You've got some people who are kind of regarded as in-group, some people are regarded as out-group. What happens if that person retires and a new person is brought in from the outside? Then new relationships have to form. What if a person is promoted from within the group? What if a person retires and you have all these in-group and out-group relationships, and then one of the persons who is regarded as an out-group member becomes the in-group, becomes the one in charge, and now new relationships form or maybe reform. So it's an interesting take on kind of how organizations work. All right, but we're going to come back to this. There's something very special at play as far as our understanding of leadership, and it has to do with this in-group right here. All right, so that's LMX, leader member exchange, vertical dyad linkage theory. All right, before getting into the next stuff, I got to go back in time and bring up some good old Max Weber, German sociologist, wrote on bureaucracy, the Protestant work ethic, other things. But Max Weber, kind of one of our classic management theorists, when he was talking about bureaucracy and the growth of these large organizations and how work is done and how decisions are made, he identified 3 different forms of authority. So authority, just good old power concept that we already talked about. And he identified 3. I'm going to do it out of order as you kind of tell that I'm used to doing things. The first one, he talked about traditional authority. And traditional authority is basically tradition. It's handed down through tradition, but I like to think of kind of like royalty, kings and queens and princes and princesses, and how authority is passed down after one of them leaves, whether they die or step aside or whatever it may be. But we have to have rules on who's going to have power. And so traditional authority says it's the one who's next in line. And so tradition kind of tells us who next in line is. And a lot of times, with kings, that traditional way of doing stuff, it was inherited. So the next in line to the crown became the king or queen or whoever it was. And everybody else was just kind of out of luck. That was traditional authority. Then, as we started developing these large organizations, for most of mankind, we were farmers. And then some other things too, but for the most part, we were farmers. But through the Industrial Revolution and the development of these large organizations, things changed. People were moving off the farms and they were moving into the factories, which some of them became very big. And we had to figure out how to get work done most efficiently and effectively in those big organizations. So Weber was particularly interested in bureaucracy, and he talked about the ideal bureaucracy, which in the ideal form, I think is a good idea. Unfortunately, it's dealing with people, and people always feel like they're exceptions, and it messes things up. So if you're around with the org behavior class in second term, we'll get more into this as we go back and look at the history of organizing. But within legal rational authority, it's not your bloodline. That's the way I remembered it. We're going to get together, a bunch of people are going to get together, and we're going to make up the rules. We're going to decide who's going to have the authority, and we'll write it up. We'll talk about it very rationally, think about it very rationally, and then we're going to write up the rules. And once those rules are written up, it kind of becomes legal. It's the rules. It's how we do stuff. And so legal rational authority is that which is kind of developed and invented by people for running an organization. We've just had a presidential election. We had one person who was occupying that position leave, and then a new person came in. And the power that was ascribed to the previous person in that position is now passed on to the next person. That's legal rational. It works with the president. It works with governor. It works with any elected official. It also works within your organizations. And so your companies, schools, who's the principal? Who's the CEO? Who's the boss? Okay, it's all written down. And in order for you to have that authority that's described and ascribed to that position, you have to follow the rules. And so whoever occupies that position has that authority, position power. Now, Max Weber, the reason I wanted to bring him up is because he said there's something else. And this is now kind of where we're really dancing around the realm of leadership. Is this leadership? No, this is authority. It's based in kind of who your parents are, maybe. This one, is it leadership? No, it's the formal authority vested in my position as described by the people who got together and made this up. This now is something different. So charisma is a God-given gift. There's something special about the person. So right here, the source of authority is a charismatic leader. There's something right here, followers attribute the leadership superior moral qualities. The person is perceived as someone special and ordinary, not just crazy and wild and, hey, I say crazy stuff. Oh, you're so charismatic, people listen to you. No, okay, there's something that is perceived as special and interesting about that person in the minds of the followers. So it doesn't have to do with your formal authority. It has to do with you as a person. So when we talked about French and Raven and talked about expert power and referent power as the personal powers and legitimate reward coercive as the position powers, personal powers, position powers, charismatic authority is the realm of personal power. We'll come back to it. So that's Max Weber. He gave us these three different forms of authority. Some of them are position-based, but this one's a little different. This one's special. It's a God-given gift. There's something special about that person in the minds of the followers that is worthy of following and going along with when they suggest something, to be influenced by that person. And I already hinted that in the realm of idiosyncrasy credits, the charismatic leaders are the ones who deal in big deposits and big withdrawals. All right, so in the 70s, I kind of like to think one of the movies we have for the extra credit is Master and Commander. So if you've seen Master and Commander with Russell Crowe, or you've seen Moby Dick, the old Moby Dick, there are scenes in both of those where they're on a sailing ship and the wind dies and they're just kind of stuck. They're just sitting and floating directionless until the wind kicks back up. I like to think of kind of the 70s in leadership theory is kind of like that. We got done with the contingency models. With the contingency models, basically the conclusion was every situation is different. And because every situation is different, we can't really come up with any hard and fast rules that everybody must follow because every situation is different. So what do? Well, we just do the right thing in the situation. So with that realization, the field just kind of stalled for a little bit. And we had all these other models. LMX popped up. That was interesting. Maybe we remembered idiosyncrasy credits and that popped up. Path goal theory kind of got us moving, tried to get us moving again. But really the 70s, we just kind of stalled in the realm of leadership. And that's also where universal leadership, if you go back and look at the leadership grid, they were pushing that. But they also realized that that's kind of silly. 9-9 isn't always the best. So in 1978, the wind started back up again. And it started up with James McGregor Burns writing a book, interestingly enough, called Leadership. And in that book, he identified two fundamentally different ways of getting people to do things. Now, transforming is how I learned it. And I've got references to it in my book. If you pull it up, you're probably going to see transformational. That's really the next one. So I'm going to call this transforming, and I want you all to call it transforming as well, as opposed to the next one. So with transforming leadership, really when he's talking about social movements. So within any kind of social movement, there's certain unrest, something needs to be changed. And so certain people will step up and they'll be recognized. Maybe they're the charismatics. They're recognized as someone special, and so they step up, and the people said, let's follow that person. And so here I'm going to use my hands. So this person is going to rise above the people, and then what happens is this person is going to inspire the people. And in the process of inspiring the people, the followers are going to move up in that involvement level. Their understanding and appreciation of goals and values and ideals and all these things. Okay, so in the process, the one in charge, the transforming leader, is going to elevate the followers. And now here's what's different between this and the next one. And in the process, by the followers being elevated, it elevates the leader. And so what we have is this continual interplay between the leaders and the followers, where both of them continue to raise each other up to higher levels of awareness and appreciation and value and all those important things. So transforming, and again, if you go all the way back to Plato and the Republic and Philosopher Kings, he talks about the same thing, but he cautions. He said that can lead to problems if you got some people in there with the wrong power motives. So that's this transforming. I want you to kind of follow the way with Burns. He's talking about leaders and followers raising each other up through their interaction. It has to do primarily with social movements, more so than just an organization or a company. That's transforming. They've been transformed. Their involvement level has been transformed, their readiness level, their maturity level, all of those things, their values, what they aspire for, all of those things have been transformed. The counter is what he called transactional leadership. Transactional, it's all reward based. You do this for me, I'll give you a reward. And that reward is what drives performance. All right, so transactional reward, this is kind of going back to Etzioni, this is remunerative power for calculative involvement. We'll come back to it. All right, so in 1978, like I said, Burns got the wind blowing again, and the field started taking off, and we started thinking about all these different ideas that now come into play when we think of transforming people and what they stand for and what they aspire to. So in 1985, Bernard Bass. Now, we got to go back to Ohio State leadership studies. Remember the two different behaviors? Ralph Stogdill, he's the one who put the end to the trait theories with the review piece, which then became Stogdill's Handbook of Leadership, published several times after that with one of his guys, Bernard Bass. Bernard Bass is an Ohio State guy. He was there during the LBDQ and the development of those leadership behaviors. Individualized consideration, consideration and initiating structure. Here, we're coming back to it. That's my brain was looking at this right here. So Bernard Bass in 1985, 7 years after Burns's book, wrote a book. He called it Leadership and Performance Beyond Expectation. And what he did is he identified two styles, drawing heavily on the works of Burns. He then called one of them transformational. That's why I want you to, if you can keep transforming associated with Burns and transformational associated with Bass, then we'll be in good shape. He identified transformational leadership and transactional. And there are different subcomponents, which I didn't list. If you want to go into more detail, you can. But in transformational, he said that there are three ingredients originally. There are three ingredients. The first one is charisma. And it's using those same ideas identified by Max Weber. This is God-given gift. There's something special about that person that's worthy of following. Later, charisma was split into two different ones. And it was so they could all start with I. Idealized influence and inspirational appeals. You go back to Etzioni, you look at that normative power. I said it was the power of persuasion and appeal. And you set ideals, look at what we could strive for, look at what we could work for together, this new and better state. And that's how I'm going to influence you, and I'm going to inspire you and ask you to come along and do this. So with those, they later broke charisma into these two pieces right here, and they quit calling it charisma. They talked about the 4 I's of transformational leadership. These are the other pieces that have remained. Intellectual stimulation. The transformational leader, the one who brings about this exceptional performance, is one who gets the followers to think differently. It's not just about the transaction or the reward, but look at what we're doing here. Look how important this is, and look at what we could do if we work together. I'm going to get you to think differently about what this is that we're doing. And then right here, he reveals his pedigree right here. The other piece he talked about, the fourth I, is individualized consideration. So this kind of contingency sounding. It's not just people behaviors consideration. It's individualized for each person. Cool stuff. Individualized consideration. You have a relationship with each person individually. Intellectual stimulation. You get people to think differently and better and higher. And then charisma, which he breaks into these two pieces. You're perceived as someone special. People will follow you because they do perceive you as special, and you're confident, and you lead them to things that other people haven't thought about or can't see. And when you're successful, you get these idiosyncrasy credits, but if you fail, that's going to be a big withdrawal, and they may never follow you again. And then the last one is transactional leadership. And so transaction, again, just like with Burns, transaction is based on the reward. So I'd like to think, if we were doing a task, if we were in class together, or maybe I had a table up at the front of the class, I would call one of you out and say, if you can jump up onto this table, I will give you and kind of going back to path goal, I got to find something that's interesting and appealing to you, maybe $10. If you can jump to the top of the table, I'll give you $10. And if that motivates, if that's interesting to the person, they would jump up and do it, I'd give them the $10. The next person, if we could kind of use a path goal, hey, if you jump up, $10 doesn't mean much to you anymore, $20 might. Okay, $20 will do it. $20, I get a person to jump to the table. My question is, what motivation, if we exist in this transactional relationship where everything is based upon receiving a reward, then what if I ask you to jump higher than the table, knowing that the tabletop is what gets you the reward? What incentive do you have to jump higher than the table? And the answer is really none, as long as we're focused on the reward. The reward comes from jumping to the table. If I ask you to jump above the table and you're just in tune with the reward, you're not going to do it. Okay, this is where I have to change the way that you think. It's not just the table. The table and that reward is not what it's about. It's about reaching your limits and doing this cool stuff that you never thought capable before. And so individualized, I know who you are. I know what you're scared of. I know what you're comfortable with, and I'm going to encourage you to do it. I'm going to get you to think differently, and I'm maybe even going to model the way. You're going to see that I'm not obsessed with the table and with the dollars. This is exceptional performance. Transactional is concerned with acceptable performance. So as the ones in charge, you need to provide the transaction and make it all very rational, that people understand that if they do this, this is the reward they're going to get. But your job as the one in charge is to pull them away from concentrating on that to something higher and something better. Now, right down here, and I think I may be hiding a little. This is one of those ideas. Now, this should be a wow. Truly effective. The truly effective leader is one who makes all people feel like in-group members. I have members written right behind there. The truly effective leader is one who makes all their people feel like in-group members. And that's done in large part because of this individualized consideration. So as the one in charge, do you know your people? Do your people think that you are concerned and aware and know them? Are you in tune with what drives them and things going on in their professional life and personal life? The ones who are really good are the ones who make all the people feel like they have a special relationship with the one in charge. That's good stuff. That's really good stuff. All right, here's another one. So this is Greenleaf. One time I was invited to come and talk to a community group about servant leadership. And when I went there, I kind of thought, okay, I think you want me to come in and talk about this, the importance of volunteering and community service. But I'm going to come and talk about servant leadership as a management philosophy and working with others. So this is Robert Greenleaf. Again, his first article came out in 70. The book came out in 77. This is mentioned earlier in the book. We passed over it in those opening chapters. So go back and take a look. It's on our textbook, pages 159 to 162. But what Greenleaf said is that true leadership is not about using others to elevate yourself. True leadership is about helping elevate others. So if you think about a healthy parent-child relationship, if you think about a healthy teacher-student relationship, the goal of a healthy parent-child relationship is to raise the children up so they exceed the parents. A healthy student-teacher relationship is one where the teacher aspires to making the students better than the teacher. That's the goal. It's not to use the people under you to keep you on top, but the goal is actually to raise the people below you up to places above you. That's Greenleaf's model. We do that through service. We go down and we learn who the people are. We understand what they aspire to and what their goals are, what their fears are, and we help raise them up to be the best that they can be on whatever dimension that is. That's Greenleaf's ideas. In my karate school, now I see this with my students as well. It's fun to have been teaching as long as I have and to see what former students are off doing in the world, all kinds of neat things. But in my karate school, it's really more apparent. Once my students can start doing things as well or better than I can, that's very rewarding. Now, the old traditional way is that I would be threatened by that, and I would make sure that they didn't learn all the stuff that I knew so that I could always be the one on top. See, that's what Greenleaf said we don't want to do. What we want to do is we want to view this as an opportunity to develop our people through service. And so we will teach them all that we can, and we'll help them develop into something even better. That's a radically different model than what ruled through the dog era, going all the way back to the pigs and the dogs through the Industrial Revolution. That's Greenleaf. You serve your people, you help raise them to become all that they can be. Even if they become better than you, that's fine. You should enjoy that and appreciate that you might have had a role in making that happen. Greenleaf. Schein, Edgar Schein. Good, it fit right above my little video right there. So I think this is also going to be one of those most important things that you might take away from the class. Edgar Schein is an expert in culture, and particularly organizational culture. And this is what keeps popping up in my brain right here. The leader's job is to create and maintain effective cultures. Remember the dynasty, the slide with the Alabama, the leadership is as teamwork? And I talked about the dynasties. How do you create a dynasty mentality? How do you create a culture of excellence? That is the culture. This is Edgar Schein, where he says a leader's job is to create and maintain effective cultures and to destroy ineffective cultures. And right here, okay, the only thing of real importance that leaders do is to create and manage culture, and the unique talent of leaders is their ability to work with culture. So again, some of these most important concepts from this course, from our time together, are just kind of pouring out one after another in these presentations. You need to think culture. You need to think teamwork, building a team and the expectations. You do that through individualized consideration, through making people feel like in-group members, through making sure that people are meeting the goals and getting the rewards that they desire, and that those rewards are just not all transactions, but the rewards are these higher level things that you are inspiring and making them aware of. Good stuff. Okay, so that's Schein, Edgar Schein. Now, let's go back here. We're almost done. This is going back to Etzioni. So Etzione's now come up the last several weeks, and I just kept wanting to show you. It's like, this is the model. This guy's identifying stuff back in the late 50s and 61 that then became the dominant thoughts of leadership for the next several decades. So here's the contingency model. So I think hopefully you see that the appropriate power base drawn upon leadership style is going to be dependent upon the member involvement level. Okay, so that have to be, need to be, and the want to be involvement levels. And so you go down and meet those people. Unfortunately, you may have to coerce these people, but in the process, try to elevate them. These calculative people, give them that reward. There's transactional leadership. Give them the transaction, but in the process, try to get them to see something better. Even these moral people, the people who are there because they want to be there, and you ask and appeal and persuade, charisma, you try to elevate them so that they can become leaders too. So the contingency model, transforming, again, the transforming idea is that we raise each other. Transformational, I didn't say it before, transformational I really kind of see as more of an organizational model. When I first started teaching in grad school, I would have 40 students a semester come into my class. And I got to, over 4 months, kind of learn who they were. And then when the 4 months was over with, they left. And I didn't get to see them again, except maybe just around the building. And then a new group 40 would come in. So every semester, I would have 40 students who I tried to pull up to me. And then the next group, I try to pull them up to me. That's really more of a transformational model. If you think about a lot of organizations where the workers, the people who are in there, are maybe not necessarily long-term, okay, my job is to train them and get them ready, and then they go on to the next thing. They promote up, or maybe they leave or do something else. I keep pulling the people up. It's really more of a pulling the people up, and the people aren't necessarily pushing me up along with it. That's the transformational. The transforming is where both of you move together. So in this model, the goal is not just to meet them at their current level of involvement, alignment of goals, values, and ideals between the member and the organization. The goal is to raise the people up. And you do that through these ideas of transforming and transactional. Okay, so path, goals, servant leadership, culture. And you do that, you raise the people up also by introducing and building a culture of excellence and the expectation that everybody is going to grow and become all that they can be. All of this stuff together. And then lastly is that transactional. It's all in there. Charisma's in there. How do you do this? Through charisma, you draw people to you and what you stand for and how you act and the successes and the ways that you treat them. All of those things can help pull people up this continuum to these higher levels of awareness and existence. Pull them right up Maslow's need hierarchy. All right. Good stuff. So really that is about it for today. Where we're going the last 2 weeks of the semester, so week 6 and 7, we're going to jump in and we're going to focus on the skills. And so I did pull these chapters out of the book kind of in a different order and kind of put all the skills together at the end. So with all of this stuff that we've studied for these past now 5 weeks, we'll then kind of put the rubber to the road and say, now, how do we actually do this? When we're trying to interact with people, when we're trying to get through situations that have uncertainty and importance, when we have to solve problems above and beyond just Vroom and Yetton's normative decision model, when we set goals, when we delegate. So a lot of these things, vision, conflict, these are things that we've kind of already mentioned within the theories, but we'll come out and pay particular attention to each of those. So that's it. That's today's kind of lecture lesson. I hope that helped give some additional thought and clarification and understanding to these concepts. Have a good week, and we'll come back together and start working on skills next week.